very, very happy to see you here. We have students, faculty, staff members, administration, outside community members. So we are very happy to start the conversation on decarbonization. A very short introduction. You all know you're here because you know these things. The greenhouse effect is true, it's happening. The more greenhouse effects we have, the warmer our planet becomes and the worse it is for us. Just a diagram that indicates carbon dioxide over time, and you can see before and after the Industrial Revolution. The horizontal line is before the Industrial Revolution, and then you can see how it skyrocketed after the Industrial Revolution. As far as disasters, we're already experiencing it as a result of the climate crisis. We have more floods, as you can see on the diagram. We have more droughts, we have more wildfires, more storms. We experience them already. And if you were here last summer in Manhattan, this is what we experienced because of the Canadian wildfires. So the reason why we're here today. Since last year, the Environmental Justice Working Group of our union that I am a member, and I didn't even say my name, Nelly Turnaki, but I know you have the paper that indicates who is presenting today. We worked with our partners and we won a transformative state-level climate legislation, the Build Public Renewables Act, that empowers the state to rapidly scale up the production of publicly owned renewable power sources in New York State to ensure the state meets its goal to fully clean energy grid by 2040. That's the goal. So the significance of this sort of transformation cannot be understated. We have billions of dollars of federal funding because of the Inflation Reduction Act, and we have to use them. Now, you all know CSI. You all know firsthand what outdated infrastructure looks like. Okay? We see it in our classrooms, our labs, our workspaces, and elevators. And CUNY's crumbling facilities are not a separate issue from the climate crisis. CUNY buildings are some of the least energy efficient in the whole state. The disinvestment that is shortchanging our members is also shortchanging future generations. We have to do something about it. We need to decarbonize CSI and CUNY, both by updating and improving our facilities and by transforming the energy system on which they rely. So that's why we're here. Another major development happened last year. The Governor Hochul last year passed legislation, announced the Decarbonization Leadership Program, a decarbonization initiative that is administered by New York Power Authority, NYPA. You're going to hear a lot about NYPA today because they're authorized to work with facilities to decarbonize them, and we have representatives of NYPA with us today. NYPA will guide state agencies on facility improvements that will reduce carbon emissions. That's the task that NYPA has. The leaders, Governor Hochul and the president of NYPA. So, NYPA this year will be developing a new plan for how to implement the Building Public Renewables Act, the act that we just talked about. So what do we want from them? We want them to act ambitiously, building renewable power sources quickly and broadly to lay the groundwork for a clean grid. We want CUNY's inefficient old buildings to be first in line for decarbonization, replacing leaky roofs and outdated light bulbs with state-of-the-art energy-efficient alternatives. And since we're in negotiations for our contract, I'm talking to union members, we want a contractual requirement that CUNY management report annually on their progress toward decarbonization. By deepening our partnership with grassroots organizations like Public Power New York, we're going to hear about that in a little bit, collaborating with public officials and turning out in huge numbers, we can put real pressure on decision makers to move us towards a livable future. I just want to mention that as we're negotiating for our contract, we have demands for common good, and number 3 is asking CUNY to give us annual reports on carbon emissions, and number 4, we are asking CUNY to reduce single-use plastics, among other things. So, with this introduction, I would like to say that we have 6 presenters. You have them also on the paper that you received. But we have 6 presentations. We're going to start with specific issues that we deal with within CSI, and then we'll move out of CSI to Staten Island and New York in general. So we start with specifics, we go to something broader, and we're going to start. I will be introducing each person as they come up for their presentation. Nora Santiago is the Sustainability Program Manager of CSI. She works at the Office of Sustainable Community Planning. She will talk about composting and a few other things that we do at CSI that she is the leader of. So let's start with Nora.
Welcome. Thank you all for coming. This is very exciting to talk about all the efforts that we are doing at CSI. And just a show of hands, did anyone ever came to any of my sustainability events on campus? Okay, pretty good, pretty good. So as Nelly mentioned, I work for Office of Sustainable Community Planning, and I'm the program manager. So what I do is try to incorporate different way of learning for students, hands-on learning, so they can actually do the activities that will help reduce our carbon footprint. So I'm going to talk about just 2 of the initiatives today because of the time. I'm going to talk about composting, tree planting, but we're also doing a lot with clothing. So composting, how many of you compost? All right, we got a pretty good show of hands. Did you know that we compost at CSI? So we compost all our pre-consumer waste from cafeteria. And this is a key tool to have for climate change, because all that waste would end up in landfills and it would not decompose the correct way. It would create methane gas. So just by composting, we can help reduce our greenhouse emission, and we can help our little garden to be more effective towards climate change. So reducing greenhouse emission, like I mentioned, compost and divert organic materials from landfill. We put it in good use in the environment, so we can use it as instead of fertilizer in our garden. It's not only the compost that reduces the greenhouse gases, but it also removes additional emissions from the atmosphere. Plants take up carbon dioxide and convert them to leafy growth. Significant impact life for our well-being as humans, right? And then to mention, the soil around the trees is cooler. Actually, I'm working on a tree campus project. I'm not going to be enough, but it was interesting to walk around on campus and feeling a lot cooler just being around the trees. But we all know that, right? This is something we face now. How many days it's been since it truly rained? So if you have a garden or if you go outside and look at your grass, you might find areas that are very dry. So having compost also helps to keep your soil moist. It helps with erosion, and it also helps our planet. But I want to show you what we're doing at CSI, right? So we compost. Our compost, I could say it's in our DNA now. It started out with a very simple workshop in 2017. You see inside the classroom. That's probably weird, how you compost inside a classroom. Well, this was just a way to introduce students to the concept of composting. If you walk around on campus, you might have noticed this composter. This was the first one we put together by Success. This is a donation from Stock Harbor. And something that was just I don't know those pictures. I guess that's what happened when you, well, turn your head. I don't know what happened. But so when you, we had this event like maybe twice a semester, and it just grew. It just grew. Obviously during COVID, we didn't do much composting, but someone else did. Jody Marandino, during COVID, she started composting all the pre-consumer waste in our cafeteria. So that's where the idea came from. And then as students start moving back, Jody is like, no, I can't handle it. It's like too much. We don't have the time. So this was one of our first workshops that we did right after coming back from COVID, because it was safe. You saw people still wearing masks, but they wanted to do something together. As the more people, and my pictures turned sideways, sorry about that. As more people came back to campus, more food was served, there was more compost. So we needed additional composter, and Snug Harbor has been a great partner to provide us with composters. Starting fall of 2022, we actually started a monthly composting. There was two reasons. Kier is here with me, and Brenda was here at the time. We just couldn't handle it. It was 300-400 pounds of food every single month. It's a lot to lift it. So we came up with this idea, we just need students. Why don't we just make it a monthly workshop? And then Kier was suggesting that we do compost drop-offs. Some people were interested in dropping off their compost, and they still do. And some people are doing it on their own, which is great. That's what we want. I can't believe these pictures. So the new composter was needed again. And I called Stock Harbor again, and they were kind enough. I can't call them anymore. They don't have any of this stuff. But they gave us another composter. This is by Success. So we compost in two locations, 1C and 6S, every month of the year. Tree planting. That's one of the other projects that we started at CSI. We all know that trees are important to remove carbon dioxide from the air. They release oxygen into our atmosphere. Trees provide many benefits for us. I actually did a whole class on just tree planting, so I'm not going to go there. But we all know, we love the trees. It makes us feel good. It's purified air. It helps the soil. It helps with erosion. And we can go on and on. This is the biggest challenge facing, climate change is the biggest challenge that we are facing today. Every single tree you plant is the direction to the right direction. So we also know that their communities are healthier and happier if there are trees around. Actually, your real estate value goes up if you have a tree-lined street. We know that there are certain communities that are underserved and they don't have trees. And again, we can go on the benefits. It's important for wildlife. They live on the trees, right? They need to have a place where they can be safe and able to live in different environments. I'm trying to get through. So 2019 was the first time we celebrated Arbor Day that's the only time I could remember at CSI, and it all happened because a professor, and I don't remember his name, I know his first name is Tony. If Rich Fellingham would be here, he would know. He was teaching a conversation class. And he said, conservation class, sorry. And he said, we wanted to plant trees. And then, I don't know, someone from facilities called me. He's like, Nora, do you have an idea where we need trees? And I was like, of course. So that's how it started. This was the first, it was an evening class, I think starting at 6:30. And you can see they planted trees between 3 and the dorms. Then it just snowballed into more trees. 2020, we couldn't plant. 2021, we planted, 3 of us, 2 faculty and myself, and we had students from the athletic team that helped to plant these trees around the baseball field. The following year, we received no trees from Department of Parks, so I ended up just bringing tree seedlings from home. Unfortunately, didn't make it. All right, the following year, so we had more success. We had 19 trees planted. We're still focusing on the area by the dorms and the baseball field. And this year we did something different. We spoke with facility staff, make sure, first of all, we don't hit any electrical line. We do that every year. But also, we wanted to reduce, if you look at our parking lots, there is like no shade. There's very few places where you find shade. So we have a kind of an urban heat problem where you walk around certain roads or you're in a parking lot and it's just blasting. It's just so hot. So this is the first time we did it, and they all took. They all seem happy. This is in front of 2A. So I hope I kept my time, and if you have any questions, please stop.
While the second presentation is preparing, I want to mention that all of our presenters are going to stay after the presentations and meet with you in small groups if you have specific interest in whatever they're presenting. But do you have any clarifications or any questions for Nora now? Before
Does she have time just to mention the clothing? Because that was a
Yes, so okay, very quickly. So the clothing, yes. We have a clothing initiative where we collect clothing on campus. We have 3 bins, one by one 6S, 1R, and
2A.
2A. Thank you. Yeah. And those clothing that placed in this bin gets recycled, either made into rugs, or some of them made into insulation, like denim jeans are perfect for insulation. In addition to that, we do stop and swaps every year where community can come in and bring their clothing. And again, this is just another way of removing all that textile because it costs, it's horrible for the environment, all the new clothing that's being created.
Thank you, Nora. Thank you so much. The next presenter, Frank Salzillo, Senior Stationary Engineer at CSI, will talk about monitoring electricity use on campus. So we're still within CSI.
Yes.
Frank, go ahead.
Hi, how are you, everyone? I'm Frank Salzillo, Senior Stationary Engineer on the campus. What that means, I work with a really good group of operating engineers who essentially have their hands on almost all the energy consumed on campus. Either directly or indirectly, they're responsible for a lot of it. When you don't think of us, you're probably comfortable and everything's great. And when you're in your classroom and a little hot or a little cold or a lot hot and a lot cold, we're who you call. But we like to say when you're not thinking of us, that means everything's perfect. I do want to note that we work with student workers, and Mohammed sitting right here actually put this whole presentation to me, so together for me. He did a beautiful job of it. I can't take credit for any of it. All right. What we do is, where are we? This isn't the first one, is it? All right, we'll go with that. I'm sorry, I'm going to scroll through. I think we're backwards. There we are, okay. So one of the ways we monitor energy on campus is we have software called New Energen, and it's a real-time monitoring. It looks right at our Con Edison energy meters. And it was installed as part of a larger CUNY initiative to participate in demand response programs. Demand response program is when we email the campus saying like, hey, it might get a little warm this afternoon, Con Ed's asking us to pull some power. That's like a brief way of saying that there's this huge program in place to kind of try and get some of the big energy users in the state. It's actually a statewide thing. I believe it's federal, but New York State is the one we focus on. And it's essentially a way to get the utilities to not have to ramp up dirtier sources of power. What they'll do is they'll incentivize the users of electric to cut back rather than start up peaking power plants. That's a whole big topic that we could go into, but essentially we're always successful with it, and really the people to thank for that are everyone sitting here, because you guys are always patient with it when we do it and understanding, and it's been really successful. Mohammed put up a great chart showing what we're trying to do. We're trying to stay in that blue line and use the cleaner sources of energy rather than go into that red and possibly blackout. All right, What else we have here? I'm sorry, guys. I don't know why they're all mixed up like this. Where are we? No, I know, we're a little mixed up here. But, all right. So, some of the other things we do on campus is we're constantly looking at, our primary goal is people's comfort, right? That's number one, safety and comfort. A lot of people here know me from the COVID walkthroughs and talks, and we talked a lot about ventilation. Ventilation is inherently energy intensive, so we're constantly walking a fine line between keeping the campus safe, keeping it comfortable, and being energy efficient. And routinely, we'll look at different ways of being more efficient and making people more comfortable. Interestingly enough, we accomplished something in 6 South where we, I think, hit both things, becoming more efficient and making people more comfortable. There was a section of the building that was complaining a lot about noise. When we started looking, we found that we were grossly over-ventilating a section of the building. We took a real hard look at it, went through, rebalanced it, brought it back to, I shouldn't say back to, brought it into design specs. I'm not even sure. You know, that building's undergone a lot of renovations over the years. But we brought it back to design specs, and what we found was we were able to lower the static pressure that we run at, which essentially is a technical way of saying that we were able to kind of put the system in cruise control and lower the speed, right? We still got to our end destination by running at 50 miles an hour rather than 60. It saved a good amount of energy, and the users in that part of the building seemed very happy. James Sicardo actually just recently reached out saying that the building seems more comfortable. In particular, where it is, if you have up there the north side on the second floor, the north half of the building, second floor, is the exact area that we noticed it. But by reining that in, we were able to adjust everything on campus, in that building. And don't mind some of the pictures. These are real pictures of our machine rooms. That's a real workbench that they use up there. All right, 6 South condensate return pump. This was a small little thing that the guys did, but it has a big impact. It was just one of those things that kind of fell by the wayside in between budgets and whatnot, and one day it was like, oh wow, we have to fix this pump. What it does is essentially there's parts of the building that use steam. That steam condenses to water. Instead of dumping the water on the floor and wasting it, pump it back upstairs and get it back to use. It was a small thing, big impact though. The end result is less electric use, less gas use, and a lot less water use. And the equipment lasts longer. Again, these are industrial parts of the campus, and the pictures kind of show it. All right, 1CAC4 serves our kitchen. For many, many years, we were told that kitchen ventilation has to be 24/7. Recently, we questioned it, and that's not true. There is no requirement for kitchen ventilation to be 24/7. It has to be ventilated when the kitchen's in use. Simple thing, it just involved asking the question, why are we running this all the time? And oddly enough, the question came up because we go through twice as many fan belts on that fan as other fans. You know, it just requires more maintenance running it more. So we did some research on the code and programmed the building. We have a computerized building management system, and the guys are able to actually write a computer code to say, you know, hey, only turn this unit on when there's people in the space. We don't, before everyone starts getting a lot of ideas, we have that ability with some of the bigger pieces of equipment. We don't have the ability with like every classroom. But that ultimately reduced energy usage and made maintenance on the unit a lot easier. Okay, freeze protection pumps. Mohammed actually identified this one. There was a glitch in our building management system that was causing these small pumps, but they consume energy, to run 24/7, 365. We need them to run 24/7 when we're worried about freezing a coil. We have very expensive copper and aluminum coils in these air handler units, and we really need these things to kick on way before freezing temperatures. Having said that, when it's 100 degrees out, we definitely don't need them. Mohammed noticed it. Mohammed went through and made a real comprehensive list of which ones were a problem. And again, the guys, I'm blessed that I have some guys that actually do the coding in-house, and we save calling a contractor and all that, and they were able to do that. What else do we have? For North AC2, this one came up as part of a capital project. We noticed that we have a large fume hood in a makerspace lab that's under construction. And in looking at it, it seems to be one of those things, this is just always how it's been, and we questioned it. We were running makeup air for a space as if we were pulling exhaust from it all the time. It turns out we're not pulling exhaust from it all the time. We're only pulling exhaust when someone's using that fume hood, and there's no reason for this fan to run all the time. So it's very simple interlock. Again, the guys write a quick computer code. When they see this exhaust fan come on, put this on, and we keep the room comfortable. And save a whole lot of energy and maintenance. This is something that we just got funding for. We could thank Keith in the back for finding us funding. We're waiting for the parts to come in. It's actually not done yet. But we have pumps in the main circulating pumps. The people that walked through the central plant with me over the years have seen them. In the early 90s, the only way of keeping these pumps cool was to dump city water into them. There was a redesign a number of years ago that used oil and a fan to keep them cool. And the oil stays in it, it doesn't get dumped or anything. We just bought 2 of these to replace ones that have failed, so it wasn't, we're not throwing away good stuff. But ultimately, it's a significant amount of water that we're gonna save. That's the big savings on that. And it'll be a lot less maintenance for the guys. This is, you'll notice that's a recurring theme. The less maintenance we have to do, the more time we could spend helping other people out be comfortable. All right, LED lighting upgrades. There are larger capital projects in the works, but a number of years ago, again, Keith was one of the big people with this, was why are we ever buying a fluorescent light? We have to change the light, why not just put an LED? It makes an impact. It starts with literally a single light bulb, right? In your house, it starts with a single light bulb. On a college campus, it starts with a single light bulb. I'm sure people have seen it in a number of classrooms over the years that how to be relamped got LED lights. One that I could think of off the top of my head that's beautiful is the Green Dolphin Lounge. They redid that whole area, and it looks beautiful. I'm sure it saves a ton of energy. Mohammed has lots of numbers on that. He has fun facts about 15% of a building's usage is lighting. New chiller number 4. This was a large capital project. This chiller is amazing. It is a computer-controlled, very interesting piece of equipment. So we have 4 large chillers in the plant that cool the whole campus. They're air conditioning for the campus. The old ones were essentially like a car with a carburetor. They were simple, mechanical, go out, flip it on, and it works. This thing is fuel injection to the max. Computerized, it constantly looking at the most efficient way to operate. It's been interesting learning how to operate it, but it works phenomenal. It was one of the better capital projects I've seen in a while. It uses a lot less energy than the other ones. It's something along the lines of like half the energy of the other chillers. It's amazing. And it performs really well. It's able to satisfy the campus cooling needs much better than the other ones were. All right, and that's it. We're back to the beginning. Mohammed has some little tips on how to save energy on campus, and I think that's it. I'll be around. Oh, yeah.
And 1 second, as Professor Levine is coming up, you can ask the question. Go ahead.
The slide that you showed earlier on where you replace the water pump,
Yes.
so that water that's being redistributed, is it staying internalized in the system? Or is it
Right now it gets dumped down the drain. Right now it's one pass in and down the drain. That was the technology in the 90s. And the thing is, there's a lot to that, right? It's inherently not green to throw out a good pump, even though it may use more water than we want. Having said that, when the pump failed, we're not going to replace it with the same pump. We're going to replace it with one that doesn't use water. And in theory, we won't. Once that pump's in, we'll never be running the old
I was
one.
actually talking about the earlier pump, the one that had the water from the very beginning of the.
The little condensate pump, the
Yeah.
steam one.
Yeah.
That was what was the question? I'm
I was
sorry.
just wondering if the water stays internal.
Oh yes, yeah. It pumps it back up to the boiler.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes downstairs back up to the boiler. Do we want to take more questions or?
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Excellent, by the way.
Thank you.
All this stuff behind the works that, we don't
Thank
really ever get sight of. It just, in your introduction, it did talk about offshore wind, and I'm just wondering if you have.
That's on me, yes,
That's-
Professor Levine.
Oh, okay.
Next, that's
Oh,
the
yeah,
next
right, it's out
presentation.
of order, okay. Sorry.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Great.
Thanks for all the work you're doing. It's really fascinating, as he just said, seeing behind the scenes. But I wonder how CSI could benefit from a kind of holistic decarbonization plan, like 3 other CUNY campuses got. And what's your sense of why we didn't get one?
We have a whole campus planning office that works more on those bigger picture things, on more operations. I do know, I went to a sustainability conference recently, and we weren't we're about mid-pack in CUNY. We're not one of those top energy users. I would assume that that's the reason. There is a line that they want us under by 2025, and we're under it, right? So I would assume that's what it is.
But hopefully we will be the fourth.
Right.
We know three got the plans already, hopefully we'll be the fourth. Let's move, thank you, John and Mohammed, thank you very much. So Professor Alfred Levine, who is a professor of electrical engineering, is going to talk about offshore wind power. So welcome, Professor Levine.
Hi, great talk, Frank, great. First of all, let me correct it. I'm a professor of engineering and environmental science and also a professor of physics. And I've been here a long time. And so I'm going to tell you some of the history. And I'm going to start with an event that happened in September of 1970, when there was a class of 65 undergraduate engineering students who were taught that burning fossil fuel would produce global warming. The lecturer explained that we needed to transition to energy sources that would not produce greenhouse gases, and that we had approximately 50 years to make this transition. The 2 best solutions in 1970 were nuclear power and wind turbines. When CSI moved to this campus, the environmental science program insisted we needed a weather station to monitor wind speed. Since then, engineering and environmental science students have been analyzing the wind data, learning how to design and build wind turbines, learning how to connect electricity sources to a grid so people can use the energy, and learning the importance of the transition to sources that do not produce global climate change. Sadly, the United States has failed to make the required transition in the past 5 decades. Statement of fact. Fortunately, the leaders of New York State have recognized the crisis. The state of New York has declared that the upstate region will rely on hydropower from Canada and solar power from New York State. They've also declared that the downstate region will rely on offshore wind turbines. Our state is aware of the need for increasing the number of people who can work to achieve this goal. Now, it turned out that when the state looked around and said, well, what schools know something about this? Well, the College of Staten Island was given the task of developing the curriculum needed to implement the design, building, maintenance, and operation of both the offshore wind turbines and the necessary electrical grid. The state has given us $600,000 to buy equipment that our students are currently using to learn about this. We expect to get roughly $800,000 from the federal government, and we have a request into the city to get $900,000, so that we can achieve what we have been required to do. Let me get, how do I get to the next one on this? Hold on. I'm doing this. So now let me get a little geeky here. Current electrical grids are designed for variable loads with somewhat predictable behavior, connected to reliable sources where some can be switched on or off in minutes. Both solar, photovoltaic, oh, I should add, if I were giving that same lecture now as I gave in 1970, I would add solar photovoltaics to the list of possible solutions. That would be the only change I would make in the class. I could use my old notes. Both solar photovoltaics and wind turbines are intermittent sources. For solar panels, we know they do not produce electricity at night. This is completely predictable. I guarantee it. The wind turbines produce zero electricity whenever the wind speed is below a cut-in value. Obvious. But what's not obvious is it produces zero electricity when the wind speed is too high, when it's above a cutoff value. These blackout intervals occur at unpredictable times and last for unpredictable intervals. Well, if the carbon-free power provides less than 10% of the total, it's easy to attach solar and wind to a grid. That's what's happening right now, thankfully. But when most of our electricity is going to come from these carbon-free sources, we will need a completely new design for the grid. Expecting to use battery storage to solve this problem is unlikely to be successful. Our faculty and students are studying these and other issues in their research projects. Should we build a wind turbine at CSI to generate electricity? Well, we've been studying this for 2 decades. We have concluded that the CSI campus would be a terrible location. Really horrible. The wind turbines should be built offshore, which is why we're doing that. So if there's one thing you're going to take away from this talk, it should be the next sentence. CSI should generate alumni, not electricity. Yes, we need engineering and environmental science alumni who can design, build, maintain, and operate new systems to generate and distribute electricity. But the biggest mistake we can make as a society is for anyone to say to the engineers and environmental scientists, okay, you fix it. That's not going to work. We need finance alumni who can figure out how to pay for these systems. We need political science alumni who can question politicians who claim that global climate change is a hoax. You know, there are some of them. We need English alumni who can write books and essays that can convince every human of the importance of the transition to a zero carbon economy. And I'd like to acknowledge my colleague, Ashley Dawson, who has, with his eloquence in his books and his essays, done a much better job than I have of convincing people of this. To be blunt, I have failed in the last 50 years. I didn't convince anyone, even though I knew it was required. We need teachers who can educate the next generation of their ability to succeed, where my generation has failed. So what can we do? Well, we just heard a bunch of them. And I want to acknowledge, well, let me just say, modern buildings are more energy efficient than ancient structures. Another thing I want you to take away. CSI is the only CUNY campus that has not had a new building in 4 decades. We have been underfunded both in capital and operational budget. This is a disgrace. I would like to thank the people, like Frank and Muhammad from Building Grounds, who have worked miracles with disastrous designs. The HVAC system in many of our buildings cannot be properly balanced. Statement of fact. We can try all we want. Some rooms are too hot, while other rooms are too cold in both summer and winter. Is that a fair statement, Frank? All of our lighting should have been converted to LEDs years ago. We have never received our fair share of capital money or operational money. I do not have a solution to these decades of underfunding. Thank you.
Thank you. One minute, as Professor Peters is getting ready, I think there is probably a question or two for Professor Levine. Michael, you have a question now? Okay, go ahead.
You mentioned that CSI is not a good place for a wind turbine, but are there areas on Staten Island that could support one?
No.
Because I'm thinking of the dump,
Let's
which
think.
is a wide open space.
It's not a question of no. For one thing, the dump is wide open space, but as our environmental science students showed when we argued to close the dump, it settles. If you put a structure up there,
It can't sustain.
a year later, it'll have been broken.
At Rutgers, all parking lots, which are substantially smaller than our parking lots here, have solar panels on top.
I would put solar panels in. I'm dealing with wind.
Right. Have you costed out like solar panels and how much it would?
Yes, and we have, and it does not seem to be really economical. I still support it. I'm not opposed to solar. I am opposed to the idea of trying to build a wind turbine here. Well, let me turn it around. All right, Ashley. We should build a wind turbine as a sculpture. Our image should not be the disastrous Verrazano Bridge, which was built in a way where they didn't allow a subway to go across it. Because Robert Moses said everyone on Staten Island should drive a car. Our brand should show a wind turbine. All right? And so, yes, but it's a piece of sculpture. It's not something that will really do anything other than help us recruit students. And if we are the only school within New York State that's offering these courses, and we are, we should be attracting students from all over the state, from all over the country, and right now, just as in the environmental science program, from all over the world. I've had environmental science students go back to, for example, Pakistan and build wind turbines. So there are things that we can do in terms of generating alumni who will make a difference. But it has to be all of us, not just you engineers and environmental scientists should worry about it, and we're just going to pretend that it's no problem. Hi.
Where's the closest place we should build wind turbines?
I can,
Where's the closest place we should build wind turbines to Staten Island?
along the Arthur Kill, right? There's a lot of land there. In fact, I will tell a story that relates to the early days of the environmental science program. One of the first successes we had was they were building a liquid natural gas tank on the south shore, along the Arthur Kill. And we analyzed the risk associated with transporting liquid natural gas from that tank to Astoria, Queens, to burn it to produce electricity. And we came up with this scenario where there would be a collision right next to the United Nations and the explosion would knock down the UN. And a day later, that program was closed. But those rusting LNG tanks have been sitting as an eyesore that we all see when we drive down the West Shore Expressway. I am happy to say they're going to be torn down so we can construct wind turbines there.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much. We're moving ahead with Professor Peters, who is faculty in the Accounting and Finance Department of the School of Business. And he's going to take us from CSI to Staten Island while he's talking to us about transportation.
That's great. Thank you, Nellie. I asked Dr. Konecki, can I talk about the Staten Island as a whole and then talk a little bit about the campus, because I'm going to talk to you about transportation. And you can have the most green buildings you want in the world. If everybody has to drive to get there, that's a real problem. I'm pulling data from the U.S. Census, okay? And I just want to give you a brief overview of what the data looks like. If you want to talk about commute times, there are 12 counties of 3,000 in the country that have a longer average time, more than 41-minute average commute times. And we're one of the 12. There they are, okay? If you look at us, we are arguably the worst commute in the nation on Staten Island, okay? And everybody who lives here on a day-to-day basis knows how problematic it is. If you want to get the worst one is there, it's Pike County, Pennsylvania, up in the Poconos. They have a very long commute, okay? But there sits Staten Island at 42.6 minutes as the average commute time, okay? And this is all based on U.S. Census 2017. And the reality is we have a very, very frail system off campus. If you want to get an idea of where the Staten Islanders go to work, there they are. 108,000 of them wake up. There's 250,000 commuters on an average morning. 108,000 go to Richmond County addresses, Staten Island addresses. Anybody want to guess how the average Staten Island commuter gets to a Staten Island job? Go. By car. Welcome to the team, okay? So why don't Staten Islanders take transit? By the way, I've been fighting with the MTA for 25 years, okay? And I'm going to tell you right now, there are things we can do to make this better, but we're not doing it, all right? Second most Manhattan, third most Brooklyn, Queens. By the way, there's not a lot of commuters from out of region. Actually, very few people come to Staten Island. Places like Middlesex County, right next to us, doesn't have a real strong commuting flow, in part because there is no transit system. As a matter of fact, in the city of New York, we have the lowest percentage of workers from outside the borough. Has everybody got it? So that's a little bit about Staten Island. Happy to answer any questions about that later on. But the reality is we work with a very frail system. Okay, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our on-campus issues, because Staten Island, CSI is fun. We have a lot of, I always say we're a microcosm of all the problems we have on Staten Island, okay? So this is the bus map of Staten Island. It is very difficult, if you don't know it, to get from other parts of Staten Island to the campus, right? If you live in Great Hills, I grew up in Great Hills. You live in Great Hills, you try to come to this campus, I wish you luck. Bus systems usually can be flexed. That's one of their big advantages. They're cheap to run. You can change the routes. Well, they haven't changed the routes, and last time I checked my watch, we moved here in 1993. Our campus, by the way, this is from 2009. I'm going to shout out to Nora Santiago. We did this work back when we were running the shuttle bus, just so you give you a quick overview. We only have about 11,000 students right now. We were 13,000, but you know our campus. This is where our people live. This is old data, but I'll pull the new data. I'm sure it's about the same. Bulk of the students come from Staten Island, a bunch from Southeast Brooklyn, relatively few from New Jersey. We put together the shuttle bus, which we ran for 11 years, 12 years. Had over 250,000 riders on it at the peak period in 2019 or so. It was a funding challenge for the college to run the bus. I will say this. That shuttle bus would have been the biggest transit system in many states. If you were in South Dakota, or you were in Wyoming, or you were in Montana, that would have been bigger than your transit system in the state, okay? So it was a massive ride. By the way, it was $4 a ride on average when it was running, which is pretty good in transit world. Anybody who says otherwise. Long Island Railroad ride costs probably about 25 or 30 bucks. Everybody got it? MTA subway ride, about $4.50, $5. Got it? So $4 is pretty good. There was a shuttle. We did the demographics of who rides the shuttle. You can talk about it later. I'm happy to make this available. Where did the people come from? A lot of them came from the ferry. A lot of them came from the bus, local bus. What was interesting when we mapped it, Nora and I mapped the data, what was interesting was notice all the kids coming from the South Shore on the Eastern Shore. That's because if you get on the Staten Island Rapid Transit, you get to the ferry terminal at a known time, right? You get on a bus and you're coming from Great Hills by bus. What time are you getting here? Nobody knows. That's right. That's the correct answer. But notice the kids coming from Southeast Brooklyn who could come up to this ferry terminal in Manhattan, the large number of Southeast Brooklyn kids from the Bronx and such. This was who was using it. By the way, look at Mariners Harbor. Kids were taking the bus from Mariners Harbor down to the ferry terminal because you could get to the campus. You cannot easily get from Mariners Harbor to this campus. So if we want to talk about it, by the way, we did all the carbon footprint. We'll happily make this available to you, how much we saved. You can look at it. We estimated that the shuttle bus was saving more carbon improvement than the National Park Service conversion to electric. Okay? They were going to save like 750,000 tons, and we were saving in that range. Okay? So 784 metric tons a year. We save that. We save about 719 tons a year we were saving running the shuttle bus system over people driving to campus. Oh, by the way, to give you a number, you'd have to plant 16,744 trees a year to do the same kind of offset. So while it's nice to talk, and I try to keep myself under time, let me just say this. I'm going to challenge everybody to say, okay, we can fix the buildings. I like that's great, Frank, but we've got to get everybody off of private automobile. And we're only going to do that with better system. And our system stinks. It's not up to national standards. It's not reasonable. It's not acceptable. We had ideas like share rides. Kids come from Brooklyn, right? Why don't we share rides, have ride-sharing services where people pick each other up? We have a lot of kids with cars in Brooklyn. We have a lot of kids who have no cars. We talked about expanding transit. Let's get with the program here. We've been fighting with the MTA. Rob Wallace and I are talking to the MTA, you know. We could expand system. We know where the students are. Look, we know where they are. We know where we should pick your house up. By the way, how are you supposed to get to transit? Does anybody know? Just a walk. Look at the subway. There's no parking at the subway. Why do our kids have to take 3 and 4 buses and transfer and all that jazz? We should pick them up at their houses and drop them off at their houses. We've talked also about expanding transit services. We want to have services out to Mariners Harbor. We want to make it easy to get from Great Kills to this campus. We have not gotten the responsiveness from the MTA that we need to make this happen. All right? There it is. I wish I had better news. I've only been doing this for 25 years. But I can tell you right now, we'll do better.
As Professor Dawson is preparing his presentation, we have questions.
Go.
John, are you hearing about what's going on in the 93? The students are talking about being passed by buses.
Yeah.
Also,
No.
recently I understand that MTA told our campus leadership that 85% fare evasion is happening at both of our stations,
Yeah.
and that there's no reason they would continue that service if they're not.
I've heard counter arguments that the bus drivers are not pushing for fare collection.
Yeah, I've also
Therefore,
heard that.
I would argue that we don't run the MTA, we don't run their buses. This is a classic response that we don't make any money. Well, you don't make any money. You provide this as a necessary public service. By the way, I'll point them to the bridge tolls, because they always say, I have no money. I'll point you to the bridge tolls. When you go on the Verrazano Bridge, anybody want to guess what percentage of money goes to subsidized transit? It's about 65% of the dollars. So when you pay that, what is it, 16 now, 18?
Yeah.
About $12 is going to transit. And every time we show up, they say, I have no money. I go, look in the other pocket. In the other pocket. Anything else? Right. Go.
On the fare evasion, I mean, you know, they ran a pilot of 5 buses, 46 just ran right by my house, which was terrific.
Yeah.
Ridership went up 23%.
Yeah.
So free fares, more people will ride the buses. Be nice if we paid for that through congestion pricing, which seemed like a good idea for a moment. But you know, free buses would not be a bad idea to encourage people to get out of their cars.
Yeah, when you have 85% fare evasion, you're doing all this effort to collect fares and not collecting them. You got to say, like the shuttle. We ran the shuttle with no fare, right? That saves you a bunch of money because you don't have to have fare collection, right? Anything else? Sorry, no, Godfrey.
Years ago, it was said that 11% of all the toll money collected on roads in the United States was collected on Staten Island. Is that still true?
Yeah, it's about 6.5 actually.
So
And I think right now it's about 6.5. The Floridians have been adding a lot of tolls recently, and the Californians raised their tolls. But the 4 toll booths on Staten Island collect in the range of $450 million a year.
So,
And every time that's the Port Authority and the MTA, and every time we go talk to them, they cry, no money.
well, shouldn't some of it be spent where they're collecting the tolls?
Mike was talking about the congestion pricing zone. The congestion pricing zone, read the EIS, was going to jam an extra 1,000 trucks, 18-wheelers, on the Staten Island Expressway. You could invest in the community a little bit, you know. They had no plans for improvements out here. At least I didn't see anything yet. Go, sorry, one more.
Could we also say that the jamming of the 1,000 trucks and not collecting any tolls would also be because of the fact that we still don't like, not only did we not invest in subway infrastructure, I think especially Moses, I think that Professor Lee mentioned earlier, just did not want any subway infrastructures, any bus structures on this island. So we're starting not from a, what maybe the other boroughs in New York City are doing. We're starting up with very much less than that. Is there any way that we can increase that possibility, that we can add more of these subways, add more of these buses, instead of just having to fight over which kids on the jammed S93 are going to be able to get up and swipe an Omni card on the bus?
The MTA has a responsibility to this community. The Port Authority has a responsibility to this community. The Port Authority has done a very poor job in this community in public infrastructure investment. Basically, they have nothing. They spend millions and millions of dollars on the path system. All I can tell you is we've been trying to get them to improve. There are many improvements we know about that we think you can do. The college has spent a bunch of time, Laura, myself, others have worked very hard to improve the system. We know what to do. It's a question of getting the entity. And by the way, the university did not want to support us keeping the shuttle bus. That was fully riding on the back of the students, and the university didn't want to kick their money in. Personally, I think it should have been university expense, and certainly I think we should get more out of the Port Authority and the MTA.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Professor Peters. We have two more presentations. We're moving away from CSI as we go ahead. Professor Ashley Dawson is a distinguished professor of English and an advocate for public power, as you can see here, so that will be the focus of his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nellie. Thank you all for being here. And thank you to my comrades on the Environmental Justice Working Group, specifically Nancy Romer, who's been coordinating these public power town halls all around the CUNY system. You should know that you're one of, I think now, 11 different town halls in this month at different CUNY campuses. So we're really trying to mobilize to get CUNY to be a laboratory for very radical renewable energy transformation. So I'm here as an activist. I'm a professor here, but I'm also an activist. I've been with the Public Power Campaign since it was founded 5 years ago. So what I'm going to present here reflects the perspectives of the collective of the Public Power Campaign. So since I'm with an activist hat on right now, let me do an activisty thing. So when I say people, you say power and say loud, okay? People. Power. People. Power. Louder. People. Power. Yeah, all right. Thank you very much. I'm also from South Africa, and during the anti-apartheid movement, that was the call, Amandla. Okay, so the road to public renewables. Public Power New York was founded 5 years ago. As you can see from this slide, it's a diverse statewide coalition made up of environmental justice organizations, unions, think tanks, and also local political groups. We've been thinking about how to transform the grid. What is the grid? You may not know, because it's the largest machine ever created by human beings, and it's very complicated. I mean, I've spent the last 5 years trying to figure it out. So there are three basic essential parts of the grid. Generation, right? All of the different things that create the electricity that we consume. Transmission, that is the power lines that transport energy from where it is generated to the places that it's consumed. And then distribution, smaller local systems that bring electricity to consumers. And that whole system has to be balanced the whole time. That was some of what Professor Levine was explaining in his presentation, right? We need to have a whole redesigned system that is a lot smarter, because if we don't have a balanced amount being generated and being consumed, the entire system can crash, which is a huge, huge disaster. Okay, so who is NYPA? And thank you to the three NYPA representatives who came here today. I believe it's the first town hall at which NYPA is present, so it's very exciting to have NYPA folks here. NYPA is the New York Power Authority. It is the largest publicly owned utility in the US, so, making history here. It's been around since the 1930s. Franklin Delano Roosevelt set it up back then during the New Deal era as an alternative to the for-profit utilities like Con Ed and National Grid, because he thought that those for-profit utilities were gouging the people of the state, and he wanted to have a public alternative which could generate reliable, affordable electricity. It provides, in fact, even today, the most affordable electricity in New York, and it also generates most of a really significant component of the state's clean energy. In fact, more hydropower than any state east of the of the Rockies. And very important history behind NIPA. So in 2023, after years of organizing, we managed to get the Build Public Renewables Act passed. The signature element of BPRA was that NIPA is authorized and directed to build enough public renewables projects to ensure that we meet the goals of the CLCPA. It's referred to as the Climate Act. That was an act passed in 2019, again after a lot of organizing, that stipulated that we have 70% clean power in the grid by 2030 and 100% by 2040. So quite ambitious goals. And you should know that prior to this point, NIPA was not allowed to build really significant amounts of public renewables. That was all left to the for-profit renewables developers. But it turns out they haven't been doing enough, and the state is really falling down in its effort to move towards green power. But that wasn't the only aspect of the Build Public Renewables Act. As you can see, there were 3 other major elements to it. On the right-hand side, it accelerated the peaker plant shutdown. So NIPA is now mandated to phase out remaining gas peaker plants in 2030. These peaker plants turn on during moments of peak demand. Since they only run a short amount of the time, they were grandfathered out of a lot of the state's environmental regulations. That means that they spew out NOx and sulfur dioxide and other very polluting waste into the atmosphere. Most of those peaker plants are located in communities of color, like the South Bronx, Western Queens, and they're connected to very high rates of asthma and other diseases. So shutting down those peaker plants is a part of the city's struggle for environmental justice. Then there's also the green jobs and labor protection element, right? You know, we got a lot of labor unions, including PSC, on board by insisting that we have this transition towards renewable energy be a just transition, that millions of dollars be available for training and retraining workers so that they could be brought along rather than left behind in the switch from dirty power to clean power. And last of all, it provides utility bill relief. So it creates a renewable energy access and community help program, or it kind of expands that program to benefit New Yorkers who are struggling with utility bills. So it addresses energy poverty. So really wonderful things that got into this bill, and we have to thank our allies in the legislature for really pushing for this. Unfortunately, the story since we got BPRA passed is not a happy one. Governor Hochul is failing on our climate goals. In fact, during the period since she was elected, less than 1% new renewable energy has been added to the grid. Less than 1% new renewable energy has been added to the grid. In fact, Governor Hochul has admitted that we're 3 years behind on our climate goals of 70% renewable energy. And she, in addition, has claimed that our legal climate mandates are not legitimate. So this is all really important because Governor Hochul has the ultimate authority over NIPA and other relevant state agencies to meet our goals. We need to pressure her to change course and take up our demands. And it's very important to educate ourselves because what the state tends to do is to create these contracts with for-profit renewables companies. And so Governor Hochul will point to these contracts and say, everything's fine because we have all of these contracts. But what's happened over the last couple of years is that because of supply chain issues and inflation, et cetera, a lot of the for-profit renewable companies have walked away from the contracts. So we've had literally dozens of contracts for renewable energy basically go belly up. And so Governor Hochul will point to all these contracts and say, oh, everything's fine, don't worry, we have contracts that will provide us with 70% renewable energy. But they're not actually being built, right? So we need to really pressure her, we need to watch her, and we need to push her to actually do what we know we need to do, which is to have a public authority, which isn't out to make money, but which is out to save us all from burning up, right? I mean, this is the most important issue of our times. The Amazon is on fire. the private sector is not going to save us. In fact, yesterday I was outside Citibank headquarters where people were demonstrating because they have given $1.6 billion in financing to liquid natural gas export terminals on the U.S. Gulf. And communities, black and brown communities, were demonstrating in front of Citibank, beseeching them to fund renewables rather than to fund liquid natural gas. But we need the public to, public authorities like NYPA to step up. So what are we demanding? We want, and this is very ambitious, we want NYPA to build 15 gigawatts of public renewables by 2030. That's a lot of power, but that's what we need to do to, according to our calculations, get to that 70% renewables by 2030 mandate. And we believe that that should start with bringing renewable energy to New York's historic public institutions, including CUNY. In fact, first and foremost, CUNY. And we want, as part of that, 25,000 green jobs and training for funding those jobs. We want to cut utility bills in half for those who need it most. And again, we want NYPA to shut down its polluting peaker plants. So, bring public renewable energy to college name. What is the college name? CSI. CSI, yes. How do we do that? Well, you know, please feel free to join the public power movement. You can find public power online. We have a great website. You can plug into public power. If you are a member of an organization like NYPIRG or even a local environmental justice group, please feel free to get involved. We need as many people as possible. There's a tendency I've found in politics for people to feel like we have to really push to get legislation passed, and everyone's like, okay, we've got a law passed, job done, we're going home. But it doesn't work like that, as I hope you've just seen. And we also need to get Governor Hochul to do the right thing. So please take out your cell phone right now and dial that number, 518-474-8390. You'll get a long message. Just press 1 and you'll go straight to the voicemail. And you can you can speak out that script. So would everybody just take a minute and make that call?
Press 1.
Yeah, 1 should take you straight to the voicemail, and you can just leave that message.
They have cell phone blocking on this.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Oh, my God, I didn't know that technology was available. How do I get that in my classroom?
My name is Daniel, and I am from the College of Staten Island. New York is currently facing a crisis in our energy transition. We passed one of the strongest government laws in the country. We are falling drastically short of our target 70% renewable energy by 2030. I urge you as governor to direct NYPA to build public renewables and help the College of Staten Island decarbonize immediately. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone who's doing that.
Thomas, do you want to call on my behalf?
Yes. I'll call on your behalf.
Well, I'll call on your behalf.
Yes.
Okay, I know we're on a tight schedule.
Oh.
All right.
So,
All right, then
We'll call later.
yeah, question?
Okay, as you're making your, one second. As you're making phone calls, we're going to get ready for the last presentation and take questions. Yes?
So I'd like to join Professor Levine in lauding my colleague Ashley for the work he has done in educating us on the seriousness of the catastrophe that we face, climate catastrophe. But we also have to be honest about the solutions. And you've been out there, I saw you at a presentation that was recorded, I think with the dean, on the crisis and touting the Build Public Renewables Act. But in fact, it doesn't do that at all. I mean, as critics of the bill that we're fighting in the legislature for the New York Utilities Democracy Act, this one only allows NYPA to build if the private corporations who have a stranglehold over the system and are the major obstacle to a green transition, they can only build it if they don't want to, if the private corporations. And you know, we're working through the Democrats who are, you know, in bed with these corporations. I mean, we saw AOC, who you've also touted,
I think we're on a short timeline. So
Oh, okay,
get to
but
your
let me,
question.
but
Yeah.
that was a dead end at the federal level, working with Mama Bear. And on the other side with our union, the other part of the climate catastrophe is war. And right now, we have a new Gaza opening up in Lebanon. And our union, and many of these people in this room, have been unwilling to take that on. And that's what's gonna have to, we're gonna have to take on war, and we're gonna have to take on the defense industry. Professor Levine was saying we've gotta fight with other CUNYs who are getting money for Decarbonize CUNY. That's not the fight, they're not the enemy. We've gotta redirect the money from the war machine to make a green transition. That's the kind of fight. And that's what we have to bring our union into that struggle. If we're gonna be serious, have a serious solution.
Well, first of all,
with a yes or no, because we don't have much time.
Alfred, thank you for your kind words. I think you were too hard on yourself. Obviously, there are massive political obstacles. It wasn't just you failing personally, and I think a lot of the obstacles that Jay is mentioning are the ones that we still face, unfortunately. Look, you're right, the bill was not as radical as it could have been. We debated it a lot. But the fact is that we framed it the way we did because we knew that the private renewable companies were not going to do their job. And so, in fact, they haven't. And the shortfall is massive. And so that's why we have to ask NYPA to do such a heavy lift, right, of 15 gigawatts, which is a really large amount of renewable energy capacity deployment. So we'll be lucky if we get there. And I think we can see from the last couple of years that the private sector, it's just not going to do its job because renewable energy is not profitable enough for them. So that's what I would say to your question, and I agree we need to take on militarism.
And we need to move to the last presentation. Thank you so much, Professor Dawson, for your work. One announcement, Nora is going to passing around the Clue Credit sign-in sheet as before you move out. But we have one very important presentation. I want to mention that NYPA is in the house. We're very, very happy about that. We have 3 representatives. Casey Motley is hiding right now. Here she is, one of our representatives. And Thomas Carroll is also from NYPA. And of course, we have our speaker, Nathan Anctil, who is going to talk about efforts to decarbonize New York, CUNY and New York. Thank you for coming.
Perfect. No, thank you again. My name is Nate Anctil. I am Director of Business Development for the New York Power Authority out of the Albany office, and I thank you for the opportunity to have a chat with you about our efforts and our decarbonization leadership program. This town hall on decarbonization is awesome. I don't, speaking to the audience, I think everybody is plugged in to why climate change is so impactful. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's touched every one of us in some way. There's outward ways where last year I think a lot of us dealt with, as Dr. Ternacki mentioned, the wildfires and flooding in the Hudson Valley. And it takes those things to really motivate us, and sometimes it's the littler things that really connect us. And for myself, just to share a little bit of a side, growing up, I never thought about going outside and worrying about ticks, right? And last summer, or actually 2 summers ago, my son got very sick and with Lyme's disease. And if you start looking into the science behind the explosion of Lyme's disease, you'll see that there is a connection to climate change. So it's how we're all connected in different ways to what really drives us towards that same goal. And I think with that, I just wanted to share with you something that really connected with me. It was a video clip that I thought really provides additional background.
A new United Nations report on climate change says the world needs to move away from fossil fuels and quickly to have any hope of preventing a climate disaster in the future. Now, there is some good news. The world's leading climate scientists say we still have time to avert a catastrophe if we act now. Ben Tracy has more.
It's now or never, scientists say, to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. The new UN report says greenhouse gas emissions must be cut nearly in half by 2030 to have any chance of limiting global warming to 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Any warmer than that, and floods, droughts, fires, and other climate catastrophes become much worse.
We are on a fast track to climate disaster.
The UN Secretary General says many governments and businesses are not doing nearly enough to cut their pollution.
Simply put, they are lying. And the results will be catastrophic. This is a climate emergency.
The report says the world must essentially stop burning coal, dramatically reduce the use of oil and gas, and quickly transition to cleaner forms of energy such as wind, solar, and nuclear power. And accelerate the transition to electric vehicles. There is optimism because the cost of EV batteries and renewable energy have dropped dramatically. But given the overall lack of climate action, scientists say we may also need costly technology like this facility we visited last year in Iceland that sucks planet-warming carbon dioxide emissions out of the air. For CBS Mornings, I'm Ben Tracy.
So as you can see, it's now, right? In New York State passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, as Dr. Dawson mentioned, in July of 2019. And in support of that, there were provisions in the 2023-24 enacted state budget that directed and authorized NYPA to engage state agencies to complete decarbonization action plans. So you may be asking, why NYPA? Why is NYPA the agency that was chosen for this? And really, it's an evolution and a continuation and a progression of the relationships that NYPA has fostered and developed with the state over the past 30 years. You know, every time I say 30 years, two things pop into my head. One is NYPA's been doing this a long time, and we're recognized and embedded in the state for the work that we do. And the second is, wow, I've been here for a lot of those years, and it makes me feel a little bit old, but that's totally besides the point. So it started in the early 90s where NYPA had a high efficiency lighting program where we looked at the single measure of lighting. It evolved to a more holistic building level approach through ASHRAE level 2 audits. And then recently we started, the next step was clean energy master plans, which started layering on renewables and electric vehicles. And now the next step in that evolution is the decarbonization, which we are now required to do under this legislation. The legislation requires that, if enacted, and if implemented, it has the ability to reduce GHG, greenhouse gas, at state facilities by 30%. And NYPA, using energy consumption as a proxy for GHG, submitted multiple options to the governor's office for selected participants in the program. The option that was eventually chosen was one that was a broad selection of agencies that kind of engaged as many state entities as possible. And as you can see here, the final selection was 7 SUNY campuses, 1 correctional facility, 2 OGS facilities, 3 CUNY campuses, and then 2 OMH facilities. Time for a little trivia. If you look to the left on agencies, which 2 of those agencies represent the largest energy consumption? I just heard both of the answers. So the top 2 answers are SUNY, representing 40% of the state's energy consumption. And then number 2 is the correctional facilities that represent 17%. So together, you've got 57% of the state's consumption between those two agencies. Second part, looking to the right at facilities. Which 2 facilities consume the most energy in the state? help you out. Number one is Stony Brook University. 7.8% of the state's consumption is Stony Brook University. Number two, Empire State Plaza in Albany, New York represents 5.7% of the state's energy consumption. So this is the list of the 15 decarbonization action plans that NYPA will be completing over the next 2 years. And the governor's office communicated the selection of those participating agencies last fall. And over the Q4 of last year and Q1 of this year, we conducted kickoff meetings. And at those meetings, we are emphasizing 4 things. One, that we want to highlight and leverage work that's already been done. A lot of these facilities, a lot of these agencies are already doing a lot of work, so we want to build on that success to really move those agencies forward. 2, we want to demonstrate the facilities as lead by example to other agencies. 3, provide resource justification to advance the plans beyond the study. And then 4, be action-focused and mission-driven. And with that, the action plans are going to be divided into 3 tasks. The first, as you can see, is the energy demand and usage summary. Second is the decarbonization planning. And then the last is going to be the geotechnical investigations, which would be the test wells and that type of study where applicable. The program has 2 deliverables. The first is going to be an update to the governor's office in January, and then the final reports will be due to the chamber in January of 2026. As of right now, all kickoffs are complete. The data collection is 90% done, and we anticipate task 1 of 2, which is, as I previously mentioned, the demand and usage study to be completed for all 15 by the end of the year. And then lastly, just to summarize, the decarbonization leadership program, it really positions NYPA to continue to be a leader in the decarbonization space. Through this effort, NYPA is going to have a model that we've developed in really forming these 15 decarbonization action plans, and then it's going to be a useful tool to the receivers of those plans for having a roadmap forward and resource justification to really move forward on that path. I think with that we have questions. We're coming up, and I just really want to thank you all for the opportunity to really share what we're doing with decarbonization.
A couple of minutes for questions, and then the presenters will stay behind if you have time to talk to them individually or in small groups, okay? But let's take a couple of questions as group. Yes.
Just a question. Does the NYPA have the authority also to engage in developing new types of energy? I mean, we've heard a lot about solar and wind, but that's really not going to be enough. And for example, fusion energy, which is a real possibility, low cost, safe, widely decentralized. Is that possible for NYPA to engage in that, or to give grants to those scientists that are working in that area?
We do have an R&D group where we're always looking at whatever potential there is out there. Obviously, it has to be commercially viable and it has to be tested before we would roll it out. But we do have an R&D group.
One more.
So we've heard that there may be a phase 2, and maybe the College of Staten Island might be considered as part of the CUNY that would be the focus. Is that in fact the case?
I'm not. I know we're developing a model that could be rolled out across the state. Right now, the legislation requires the 15 that were selected.
So it's more. It probably is that the examples of the other CUNYs would be then inspirations for ways that we would respond.
Correct.
Okay,
Let's
thank
hope.
you.
Yes.
Nate, thanks for your presentation and for your work. I'm not sure if everyone totally understands this, but as admirable as the decarbonization programs are, they don't actually provide any funding for the colleges and other organizations to decarbonize, to create the infrastructure. So they're kind of, one could call them unfunded mandates. So
Correct.
Have there been conversations at NIPA about using your bond capacity to follow through and actually help people do the things that your program is recommending that they do?
So I think the important piece is that these 15 plans are going to be packaged together and presented to the governor so that there's an order of magnitude that I don't think that people appreciate to what it's going to take to really make this happen. You know, you see some of these plans and people probably think, oh, it begins with an M. It doesn't begin with an M, it begins with a B, as in billions of dollars. So how is that going to, in having, you know, 34% of the state having a plan of what it would take to decarbonize really provides a better picture, not a complete picture, of what it's going to take to move the needle and make it happen. So I think that conversation and how we get there is going to be an outcome of these plans being complete, because it's going to provide, this is what it's going to take.
No federal money?
Well, any programs, any projects that we implement, we always rely on any IRA, IIJA, utility, or DOE. We always try any type of money to leverage it. It's very competitive, and you know, I think as Doctor mentioned, that the number's massive. So it's going to be all hands on deck.
We have to close with the last question.
So these 15 different plans, did each institution come up with its own goal, or is there a universal goal? And if there's a universal goal, how is their ability to meet that evaluated, and what happens if they don't meet it?
Well, as of right now, there is no penalty for not meeting it. Right now, there's a statewide greenhouse gas inventory benchmarking taking place to get a better idea. We used energy consumption just as a proxy to try to get an idea of GHG, and of the 15 that were selected, it results in 34% potential reduction in GHG across the state for those 15. The legislation required a minimum of 30. The 15 that were selected provide 34.
I want to thank our presenters, but I also want to thank you for being here. I hope this conversation is going to lead to more environmental activists, because we need them as we're in a big crisis. Thank you all for coming. And thank you.
Thank you all.